Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.
Welcome to Great Taste. I'm Steve Bosch, your host for what we hope is going to be 60 minutes of delicious content. Hopefully it'll be fun. You guys are sitting there like, you're like bumps on a log. Let's hear from you. Thank you so much. That's great. We're coming to you. We're at Green Building Supply. Maybe some of you are streaming this right now, which is fantastic. And looking forward to just a fantastic and interesting hour of discussion with my co-host, who's going to step right closer to me right now, real close, Liz Peralta. And so happy to, it's been many, many years, so happy to.
Right. Yeah, it's been a while. Thank you for having me back.
It was work to get you here. But now that you're here, you're trapped for the next hour.
We were talking about work today, but it was work getting me here.
Yeah.
Not the work that I did.
You did a lot of work. She did a lot of work, and she's made some really special things for you all to experience. She had to twist my arm because I actually put them back there so that I could take them all home. But she's convinced me that we should allow you to taste them. So we're going to do that. So meantime, how about telling everybody a little bit about your background? You're on tonight because one of the things that we're doing is we're talking about Dominican food.
That's right.
And the reason we're talking about Dominican food with you is?
I'm Dominican.
Well, today, in today's culinary world, that really is not necessarily the case. But we can go into that at some other time.
Well, I went into that today, as I was putting everything together. I'm trying to be faithful, right, to the roots. But, we're none of us from just one place. Everything that I'm making anyway is attached to at least 3 or 4 different countries. So,
it's really fun, huh?
It's great.
Yeah, because it's such an exploration. And people think, like we were having this discussion just the other day,
Yeah.
People think, and I think we might have even talked about it on the show, obviously tomatoes are a really good example in Italy.
Yes.
It's such a huge part of the culture, but they didn't come from Italy. They came from the New World. And so many things that we associate with Indian food, for example, potatoes and all kinds of other stuff that for some reason is escaping me at this moment. But all the dishes that we associate, with Indian food, especially northern Indian food, actually are not indigenous to that continent at all. So food travels. That's the way it's always been, and it'll continue to be, and it evolves. And what I loved about this process of just kind of talking about all this with you and what we were going to do is how it's evolved in just the last few days. Started out with a recipe for one dish pastelon that you're going to talk about.
Yes.
And that recipe from the recipe that you sent me
Yes.
has changed tremendously over the last few days just because you were looking at it and you're trying to think, okay, how can I be, as you said, truer? What ingredients are available to me? All those
Correct.
different things. And you have to adapt and evolve.
Correct. We also talked about the fact that anyone that cooks knows this. You start out with this amazing dish, like even if it's a cake, you're like, I can make that cake, right? And you go for it, and then you realize it's like maybe a 5-day journey. But yes, what's available to me, I can be faithful to the dish, but there's also cooking methods. There's so many things involved into making something that, possibly my grandmother made in much less time than I did today.
Mm-hmm. But and what you say too in terms of cooking methods is also, it's so very interesting because just today I was reading this post by there's on Instagram Brigade, and they do school lunch programs.
Yes.
And they make amazing food with the using the budget that's given them by the U.S. government, and it's not the kind of food that we grew up with when we went and ate our lunch at school. And one of the chefs was talking about how today one of the lunch ladies said she started to steam onions. Mm-hmm. And he said, let's try something different. And so he put them in a pan, right? And he's going to make caramelized onions. And that's going to, no, this is so much simpler and faster and everything. And he said, well, let's just see what happens. Mm-hmm. And he said by the end of the process, she was like, when she tasted those caramelized onions, she was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Let's not do steamed onions anymore, you know?
Yes. Well, we were also talking about the fact that a lot of the food that we eat today isn't really food. We went into that. There's so many topics, right? But sometimes we're in a hurry, we're at work, or regardless, it doesn't have to be cooking. But sometimes we do things, we take shortcuts, and I wasn't able to do that today because, I wanted to do the best I could, right, for you. And I also wanted to respect the process of what I was doing and make sure that I kept the things, and I also freed myself that I could pick whatever I wanted out of the pantry. So I think cooking is pretty much like everything else that we choose to do. You can do something simple, or you can just let yourself go and like a painting, pretty much.
I love that idea. I love that whole thought process. And as a trained professional chef, too, we discussed this, that it's difficult to just kind of, pull back because your mind is constantly thinking of all kinds of different things that you might want to do.
There's also reality,
Right.
You're like, I'm going to paint a Picasso, and it's like, no, I'm just gonna do the stick figure, and this is what I have time to do.
I have a feeling you did a little bit more than a stick figure, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. How about just give people a little insight into your background? Come a little closer. I won't bite.
I feel like I'm escaping stage left. Or right, I guess. Okay, well, I don't know. On the stage, it's different, but nothing. I grew up watching the adults around me cook all the time, whether it was necessity, to eat, to feed the family, or the biggest thing was the holidays. The holidays were like it was months of cooking, for these holidays where we would all get together around this big giant table with everyone that was close by as far as being in the country, right? And then from there, I thought I was going to do something different with my life, like, medicine. I've always been into science, and it just so happened that I just couldn't find my way. And my brother, Nelson, told me, why don't you go to culinary school? You're really good at it. I'm like, I'm good at that? Like, I'd never thought about it as that. And I went in there, and it was easy peasy. So I was like, all right, I am good at this. I didn't have to think about it. And I just went on I tried my best to work with chefs that didn't have to have a name. They didn't have to be famous. They didn't have to, have a line out the door. But as soon as I went to interview for a job, and sometimes before, I would research them and try to find out who they were. How did this restaurant come about, or how did this person get there? And I ended up learning a lot more than if I had, hit somebody in the knee so I could take their place at a 5-star restaurant, break somebody's knee, it's not any hard.
But your first mentor was your mother, right?
Well, it wasn't about mentoring. I mean, yeah, I was the girl and I had to learn how to cook. It was more like that, but it was also fascinating to me. I didn't realize how much I paid attention to what she was doing, like just the little things that she would do to make things just amazing, to get roast that chicken. She would roast a whole chicken, and then she would make chicken sandwiches for everybody because that was the way to stretch it. But it was amazing how she would use the gravy and all the vegetables that were at the bottom to mix in with this shredded chicken. And it was hot. It wasn't cold. It wasn't something that I was used to seeing at the deli. And she would do that, and she would help stretch it out by what she would put into it, or what was already there roasted in the pan, and she would feed everybody with this one chicken. And it was amazing. And that and a salad, and that was dinner. And it was just, the food was incredible. And she also did it effortlessly. My mother was truly, she was a genius when it came to cooking.
You might be surprised, but a lot of chefs, I've noticed this by listening to so many different chefs over the years. When they're asked the question, so did you fall in love with food because your mother was a good cook? And they, oh no, my mother was a horrible cook.
Well, she was good. I mean, my mother, there was something I always remember about her is that at Christmas, as she got older, she would make these little boxes. She would buy these boxes, and then she would mold fruit, like these tiny pears and bananas, and she would make little grape bunches with the almond paste, and she would paint them by hand, and they just looked, they just look like a painting, and she would put them in these boxes and give them away to people. And I was too young at the time. I was a teenager to even imagine like what it took to do that. I just took it for granted. And I can't do that. I cannot for the life of me do anything like that. I do something else. I can do something else. I took what I learned from her, and the passion that she put into making everything taste good. I took that with me, and then everything that I do is kind of rustic. I'll go there.
I'm with you though. It's good. So what about Dominican food? I mentioned to you that when I was looking up this dish, that one of the dishes that you're making, pastelón, I noticed that one of the references said, "Oh, it's a dish from Puerto Rico," and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, Liz said it was from the Dominican, and then I had read several other sources, and they said it's from Puerto Rico, and then finally I came upon an article that said, oh, this dish is very common in the Dominican and Puerto Rico, and then trying to trace its origins and everything. But so the food of the Dominican itself, can you give us just a little bit of an understanding of the different influences?
Sure. But before I go there, I will say that a pastelón is just a casserole. Is just whatever they call it somewhere else. Everyone has that in their culture. It's just a way of stretching the food out, making something hearty, So Dominican food. Going back again to what I said earlier, food comes. We're touched by so many different cultures throughout our history, all of us, wherever we come from, wherever we live. There is, even right now, there are people who can come here and bring something new to this little town where we are, and that could be the main dish in 10 years that everybody then, in 100 years, that it'll be called an Iowa dish, right? Well, Dominican Republic is a Caribbean island that was influenced by Native American people who lived there, the African slaves, the Spanish, the French. Let's see, I'm probably leaving something out somewhere, right? But Chinese, there's a lot of Chinese Dominicans. They speak Chinese. You go in there, they still have an accent after all of these decades. Even after each generation still speaks Chinese. So you have all types of people that just live there, and the food comes together. Whatever it starts out from the beginning, our main method of cooking is African. So the way that we cook our foods, and the way that the pots that we use, the direct fire, the direct heat, there's a similarity between the food that is that grows in Dominican Republic and that grows in Africa, in West Africa. So you have this. I don't know if it was brought to Dominican Republic or if it was growing there, but there are a lot of similarities. One of the things that was created, right, was the sugarcane, the sugarcane fields. From there, molasses. There's just there's such a blend. The Spanish culture, for instance, the paella. There's a lot of dishes that we make that are similar to the paella. We don't cook it the same, but we pretty much use the same technique. Different types of pot, but it's all relative, depending. And it's been so hard because I didn't grow up in Dominican Republic. I had to learn about it through reading books, Once I lived there for a while with my mother, and so I learned a lot more than I had ever learned from my family by looking up the history, because nobody really talks about it. This is a culture that just lives day to day.
And so tell us a little bit about this dish that, one of the dishes actually that you're going to make.
The pastelón is it's just what it's saying is a big old casserole dish. Pastelón, the big on at the end tells you the size. If it says pastelito, then it's small, right? So this is just a big casserole. I was trying, as I said earlier, I'm trying to be as close to the culture as I can. So I found the white sweet potato. And I also noticed when I was peeling it, I told you in Dominican Republic, the skin is more like a purple, lilac type of color. And it turns out that underneath this skin, there's purple and lilac right underneath it. So they're definitely, maybe because they grow in different temperatures, but they're definitely related. This one's less sweeter, but and it cooks quickly. I mean, I had a big pot. The moment it started to boil, I had to take it off of the stove and drain it because it was going to overcook. So it's very similar. In Dominican Republic, what we call it batata. And what we usually do is grill it inside of a fire, or let's say coals. So while it's in there, while it's in the coals in this heat, and you're cooking everything else, they're roasting down there, and that brings out the sweetness, and it's amazing with just a fresh glass of milk. Yeah, you don't need much.
Now, the dish itself, the way that you originally explained it to me, features plantain, right?
Well, it doesn't matter. Sweet plantains, which we have a ton of here in Fairfield. Sweet plantains are easier to find and possibly less expensive, so it's much more common. And the sweetness, I mean, plantain is like our, I'd say it's our fruit because we eat it every day. It's just when I moved down here to Fairfield and I couldn't find plantain, I went through withdrawal. It was very hard for me.
So, but meantime, as we talked about at the beginning, you evolved this recipe. It started out with all kinds of.
I didn't do much to evolve it or change it in any way, other than maybe the seasoning that I added to the filling, the way that I cooked the filling. I changed that. The mashed potatoes, which I'm going to show you soon, I brought so that I could put it together and you guys could see what it looks like. That I kept in its original state. But like, for instance, the filling, I didn't want it to be too watery. I wanted to kind of, because it's a hearty dish, I wanted to keep the nutrients in the food as much as possible. The carrots are still a little crunchy. There's also pumpkin in there, which is also, that's traditional. So I tried just to keep everything not falling apart, so I put it together, and once it heats up, it will release its essence. But that's where I differ from my mom. She would just do it the way she learned how to do it, but I apply a little bit of technique in there.
Okay. So I think that's going to be exciting for people too, because you're going to share a few of these techniques over the course of the rest of the show.
Yes.
And I think that'll be really, really nice and interesting for people to learn. So do you want to tell us a little bit about not only what you did, thank you so much. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you did that you're going to, and show us?
Yeah.
And do you need to put that in the oven to heat up, or are we good so far?
Yeah. This is ready. This should be ready to go. I put this together because I wanted to make sure we had enough time to do all the other fun stuff we're going to do. And so this is the final product. Once I put
Pick it up just a bit.
Sure.
There we go. Nice. Oh, turn it. Careful. Right.
It'll hold together, but I try to be a little careful. But there you go. That's a pastelón. Of course, you can add more or less of whatever you like more. And of course, there are huge ones. They're like this tall. We're going to try to do it as close as possible to the way my mother and my grandmother made it. But I just added a few twists because that's the fun part.
Right. So now is the top the sweet potato there?
Yes, this is the sweet potato, top and bottom, and then the filling, the eggplant, carrots, pumpkin, what else do I have in there? A whole bunch of fun stuff.
It smells so good.
Yeah.
And I imagine as soon as it starts to bake, it'll really, really be nice.
Absolutely. Once it starts to bake, that's my goal is that I let food do what it's going to do. I try not to overdo it too much, And so hopefully I accomplished that today.
Now, what I think is going to be really exciting, though, is that you're going to show us how to do this in a totally different way that is kind of fun and can be served it could be served as a main dish, but it could also be served as just a little appetizer, for example.
Correct. I mean, this is something that you would probably do if you have a bunch of people coming over and you have a lot of muffin tins around, then you can put it together and you don't have to worry about it. It'll heat quicker and you can just set it out. People can serve themselves. I wanted to bring the inserts, like the muffin inserts, but I figured it's only 6 that we're making. And this way also I can just show you how I put it together and you can get an idea of how to do it yourself.
All right, so I'm going to let you get whatever you need and bring it up here, and so we can show people how to do that. And I know you also want to make sure we get to have my hands involved a little bit later on, right? So you go ahead and do that, and I'm going to just talk for just a minute here about a few things. So the next show, everybody knows it's the first Tuesday of every month, so the next show is Tuesday, December 3rd. And Sabita Sahani will be here, and maybe even some other Indian type people who will be doing Indian type food. So that will be pretty exciting. I'm very happy that she's going to be back on the show again because she always makes something really interesting. And I'm kind of lobbying for something specific, and we'll see if how it turns out. And I can't tell you what it is right now because I'm just in the lobbying stage at the moment. One of the things that we always do on the show is there are several products that I love to recommend to people that they can pick up at Everybody's Whole Foods. So first of all, Everybody's is kind enough to give us all the food that we use on the show. It's very, very kind of them. And of course, Green Building Supply is kind enough to supply their location for us. So I'm always looking for different things that people can just pick up at Everybody's. And this time, I used this. Frontier has a whole line of organic dips, and it's really simple to make dips at home, but if you really don't have any time at all and you just want to throw something together, it's great to just pick up one of their organic dips. And I know some of you already had some before the show started, and it's really good, really delicious, and so it's just a really nice thing. And I paired this with Kelowna Supernatural's organic sour cream. The next item, organic panko breadcrumbs. It's really, I'm going to let Liz talk about panko breadcrumbs.
Panko breadcrumbs. They're awesome. I think that really because of the size, I feel like they absorb so much flavor. So I do use them. A lot of people like using the finer breadcrumbs, but I feel that this catches like all of that. When I make schnitzel, I like to put powdered ginger in the coating, just so that you have it. Kind of gives it an aroma. But it catches that. It catches it in there. Mm-hmm.
And it also gives it a nice crunch, I think, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So panko breadcrumbs. And then I've got an organic kefir from Kelowna Supernatural, which I think is a really good kefir. And because it's local, because it's Kelowna, it's nice to support, local businesses that way. And last but not least, this particular pretzel which, I mean, it tastes fine. It's good. It's not anything outstanding. But the point is, the reason that I chose it is because they know how to bake it properly. Now, most pretzels that you find on the shelves, I mean, I'm not sure what these people did, but I mean, it's like they didn't bake them at all. They're just like raw pretzels or whatever. These guys, this is baked, and that's how pretzels should be, really baked. So that's why I picked these guys. So there you go. So
Yeah.
all right. So tell us.
Okay, so what I did was just to make it easier for myself. Not only am I going to use the bag here, but I also used it to put the top coating on the pastelón, because it's easier to spread on it, because when you put it up on there, sorry Steve, when you're putting the mashed potato on top, you kind of got to throw it on there, and then the filling gets mixed in with the coating. So that's why I like to pipe it on there really quickly, and then just, kind of use a spoon to just even it out a little bit. And so I just thought it's a good trick to learn. I reuse these. I have like a million of them inside of my freezer. I clean them and I put them in there. So it's just a little trick. I cut the end off. I know you guys have seen that before.
We have to coexist. We have to
I
learn.
know, my good friend Steve. So I put a little bit at the bottom.
Can we see this?
Maybe I'm putting more than a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, but this is something, people, a lot of people, look, this is nice, right? And you don't have to be, it's like, oh, I don't have a pastry bag. I don't have, tips or whatever. You don't have to. You can just, you work it out.
Exactly. I see on TV everybody's got all this equipment, but just make it work. We're Americans. We work with what we have.
So now you're flattening it all out, kind of.
Yeah, I'm pushing it down on the bottom, kind of like a cupcake.
And what's it? Is this just the sweet potato by itself?
This is sweet potato, and I made, I guess you could call it ghee, clarified butter with garlic in it. And then when I was mashing it, after I drained it and make sure it was dry, I would add, a ladle of that butter olive oil mix and just keep mashing it until it was delicious.
Okay, so it's butter, olive oil, but it's clarified butter, olive oil. Any salt or anything?
Just a little bit of salt. I didn't put any pepper because I didn't have white pepper. I don't think it needs it. I don't think it needs pepper at all, because the filling is going to make up for that. This can be as simple as possible. Adding the garlic is just like a luxury.
I forgot that. So garlic. And is the garlic roasted at all, or is it raw? What is it?
It's cooked. It's cooked slowly in the butter as it clarifies. When it clarifies, what happens is it just separates from the whey.
So when you're making the clarified butter, the garlic is in that butter.
Yes,
Oh,
and it doesn't, very low heat, you just let it sit there, and you do have to keep an eye on it, because once it reduces too much, the whey at the bottom can burn, and it'll change the flavor in your butter. But if you take the whey out, you can continue to darken it until you're happy with it. It doesn't have to be a short time. It could be a little longer, but you do have to watch it. As it kind of gets golden.
The garlic smell is just wonderful.
And it's not fried. It's almost like just poached in there, And I don't use it at all. I just scoop the butter from the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Okay, so this is as simple as you want to go, and then the filling. Eggplant is traditional. Again, eggplant is also roasted in the live fire. There used to be, when I was growing up, there used to be a lot of cooking outside. I remember sometimes they would bring out these gigantic pots. I've never seen pots so big. Still to this day, I've never seen them so big. And they would dig these holes, light a fire down there, and then they would put these gigantic, they were huge, so that and they would make different things in there, mostly, spicy roasted stuff.
Now, can you simulate that at all? Like, for example, could you take that whole eggplants and, just keep turning them over an open gas flame until they get really charred? Or could you put them into the oven and roast it? Mm-hmm.
I've tried that, but it's not the same. You're missing that. And I'm not advocating for anybody to go out and start a fire or anything like that. I'm just saying that when I grew up, I just remember that flavor. I don't do it anymore. I try to do it sometimes when I'm barbecuing, but that flavor from that wood, it's just a memory. I don't even do it anymore. So
what's the best way you think to make
on the grill?
the eggplant?
I like it on the grill. The grill is great. And if you can't, and you're in a pinch, just turn the oven to 500 and stick them in, rub them with some oil, poke them with tines, and just leave them in there. Again, keep an eye on it because it goes pretty fast.
Okay. And so also with the eggplant, you've got the carrot, which was cooked the same way, roasted or not?
The carrot wasn't cooked. The carrot and the pumpkin, I put it in the last 10 minutes because the pumpkin cooks really quickly because of the size, and the carrot, you still get a little bit of crunch in there. You don't have everything's not overcooked and tastes the same. You can tell when you're eating the carrot as opposed to the eggplant. Everything has its place.
And that's one of the beautiful things about when you have a chef, cooking. They think about all those things where most of us, I would say, that are home cooks like me, it's like if I'm going to roast vegetables, I throw them all in the pan and put in whatever I need, the salt, the olive oil, and cover it up and put it in under, in a high heat for roasting, whereas a chef is going to roast the carrots in one pan, the onions in another pan, and everything separate so that it all gets done at the right temperature at the right amount of time and then gets combined later. But, this is a really, if you have the time to do it, that's great.
Yes, this is about having the time. This is like, something that you do for yourself and your family as a treat.
So I'm curious again about obviously the eggplant's in there, the carrots in there, the peppers are in there, the pumpkin's in there, but there's a lot of flavor in addition to that in there.
Well, yeah, I used a Dominican oregano. The reason that I can tell the difference when I'm eating it is because it has a lot of oil. It's very oily. When I was a child, the ladies would get together and they would have all this oregano, dried oregano, still on the branches, and they would sit there for hours just talking, removing the oregano from the leaves, and then once they just had the leaves, removing the leaves from the stems. Once they just had all of these leaves, then they would start grinding it with their hands and filling jars with this oregano. And their hands would stay green for days. They would have that tint, and it's just a really nice oily flavor. And it's not because I've had some oregano that kind of like, it's still good for you, but you can't eat a lot of it. This stuff, you can roll your whatever in it and roast it, and it's still, even though it has all of those oils, it doesn't upset your stomach. It's very nice. They also use it for that. They make tea for upset stomach and digestion.
Dominican oregano, they're just a different. I'm going to have to look for that. That's really interesting.
Yes, it's completely different.
Just like Mexican oregano and Greek oregano and Italian oregano.
Yes.
Fascinating, really
I
fascinating.
know. I agree with that.
Yeah, that really is amazing. Okay, so now we've got 3 layers going here. We've got the potato at the bottom. We've got this mix of the pepper, of the pumpkin, the carrot, and the eggplant, and the spices. Besides the Dominican oregano, what else? And you can substitute oregano.
Yeah, you can. When I can't always find it, I threaten people to send me oregano from wherever they are. But if not, you just use regular oregano. It's just a different flavor and some information.
And what other spices are in there?
I used porcini mushroom, dry porcini mushroom powder. I love using dried mushrooms that way because I feel like it you can get the flavor. You know, you get a deep flavor from it. I buy dry mushrooms and I grind them in the coffee bean grinder, and I keep it in a jar in the refrigerator. And you can add it to anything. You know, soup, noodles, um, pasta sauce,
Yeah,
tomato
just to
sauce.
give it a little bit more oomph.
Yes, is the word. So there you go. I'm gonna leave a little bit of space because I want everything to heat up.
Okay, so now we've got our third layer, which is again is the sweet
This
potato.
is the sweet potato, yeah,
And then what happens?
and then we put it in the oven.
Oh, so now is there any? So there's no. Is there anything that I'm missing? I mean, is there any?
Yeah,
Originally, we were talking about cheese. There's no cheese in here at all.
At the end, when I take it out,
Ah,
I'll add the cheese.
I'm preempting you.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. You know, I don't want the cheese to get to. I just want it to melt because I have another crunchy thing. So.
Oh, you're gonna. Oh, darn it! I thought we were.
That's cool. Yeah, we could talk about that.
Yeah,
That's a good
definitely.
segue.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that crunchy thing, which I was hoping was going to stay back there too, then the cheese that would be used in the Dominican obviously is going to be different than what we're going to use here. So.
Yes. Well, you know, again, I have to go back to when I was growing up because there's been a huge change, culinary change in Dominican Republic, and I cannot say what it is because I haven't been there in a long time. But when I was growing up, the cheese was made with, you know, fresh milk. Like the milk, it wasn't factory. You know, you didn't get your milk from a factory. You got your milk from small small farms, and sometimes they would ride by in a rickety cart with just these milk urns, you know, and then my grandmother would buy it, put it in a big pot, and sit it out on the stove on low, and that was our milk for like a day or two until it was gone. Then you'd get more milk, and it sat there all the time. It never got refrigerated. So yeah, there was a lot of cheese. There's a lot of great cheeses. There's a cheese, queso de hoja, which is identical to mozzarella. There's a Gouda type cheese. There are these cheeses that are so salty, and they dry them, and they're similar to halloumi. So if you cook them in a hot pan, with or without fat, you can get like a crispy melted cheese, and it's really good. Yeah, kind of squeaky. Yeah. So for this, it would probably be that Gouda type cheese. You know, it's a little sharper and stronger, and you know, you get that stringy, melty thing. So yeah, there'll probably be something like that.
So we're going to use
Well, we're gonna use Parmesan.
Wisconsin Parmesan, right?
What's that? Wisconsin Parmesan. Yes.
We don't want to offend our Italian friends.
Of
So.
course not. You know, it's not denominación, right? Yeah, it's made here in Wisconsin, but I like it because it comes the way that they present it. It comes, they shave it. They don't grind it up, and that's why I like it. I also like the texture. It's not as strong as Parmesan, but it still gives you that hint, you know.
Yeah, you know what else is really good? This could be dated at some point. Well, it won't have a 25% tariff placed on it either.
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely. You know, we got to make do with what we get. But this would be a good choice, and that's why I like it. And we could put it on now because it's not that big. It's not going to take that long to cook.
Okay, so now people can put that in the oven. You suggest using the muffin papers, whatever they're called, just because
I mean, it's easier for the cleanup, and it's easier, like people could just pick one up and walk away. So if you're doing something where you don't really feel like standing around, or you know, it's just an easy thing.
And how long and at what temperature should these go in?
When I do it at home, I'm not lucky enough to have gas. I don't know if I'm saying anything wrong. Don't get mad at me.
Well, it depends if you're talking about flatulence or if you're talking about, I don't know.
Such a boy. God. I don't have a gas oven.
Now you're being more specific, so that joke wouldn't work. So.
But I have an electric oven, so I just put it at. I always go a little higher and then test it and see how it's going to do. No matter what, as long as I have an electric oven, I'm always testing because everything cooks differently. For instance, this has sugar, so it's going to brown quicker. We do want it to heat through, so we might start at 375, and then if it's too much, then we'll lower it, because what we really want to do is, even though everything's cooked, we want to get the heat in there. We want it to be hot in the middle.
So maybe 15, 20 minutes?
I'd say, yeah, for these small ones, I'd say about 20 minutes.
Okay, good. I love this. I mean, this is like so, it's funny how some things just kind of hit you and it's like, wow, what a great idea to do something that nobody's going to expect. So this would be perfect for Thanksgiving, for like a dish that people could add to their Thanksgiving menu, right?
Yeah. I did it more as a way to show you what I had done in the bigger one, but I also thought it was a great idea for like big parties. I think it would be cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you, why do we have annatto seeds here, and why is that parsley here?
Okay. Well, the reason we have the annatto seeds is because I'm the only guest on the show tonight. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to talk. So I brought, something we could talk about.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I would never have thought about adding that topic to the show. And I can't wait to see if we're going to go past 30 seconds when we talk about these annatto seeds. But anyway, is now the right time, or are we going to do that later?
Sure,
I mean,
we can talk
it's up to you. It's your show, so.
Well, it's also something that's used in Dominican cooking. The reason that I like it is because health-wise, we also use it to kind of build up the blood. That's what they used to say to me when they used to make me drink it. But that's all I know. I did a little search on it, and what I can tell you is that we do grow it in Dominican Republic, and it grows in the Caribbean. It grows in Central America and South America. So it's native to the Americas, but I'm assuming it's probably more conducive to warmer weather. The Mayans used it to color their skin. That red tone that you see comes from the annatto seed. So if you put it in oil, you heat up some oil or warm it up and you add the annatto seeds, it's going to release its energy into there. And that oil is then used to color foods, because things like tomato paste are not things that were accessible to everyone at every time. And it was also considered something like high end. But the annatto seed grew everywhere. So it was something that was easy to acquire. You didn't have to buy it. So we would use it to color our food. If we're cooking rice or making rice and chicken, and you want to add that color, some color to it, we would do that. They would make these drinks that they would give the children all the time, which was honey, the annatto seed. They would put, also I remember, iron, powdered iron. And then they would also add a non-alcoholic wine to it, and then they would keep it in a dark place. And then once it had maturated, then they would start giving us a teaspoon of that every night. And according to my grandmother, it made our blood strong.
It's like a tonic.
Yes, that's correct.
Interesting. And annatto, if you look at like cheddar cheeses, for example, you'll see that a lot of times the color comes from annatto. Correct.
It's used more now. I know in Puerto Rico they use it even more than in Dominican Republic, because it's kind of like a lost, art. I guess, as the grandmothers started disappearing, some of the history of the food and the way we used to treat our bodies has also gone by the wayside.
So I'd love to continue to explore all these different things and get to the parsley too.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the time, and I know that you are just really anxious for me
Yes.
to do something
That is
on this
correct.
show because I never do anything. I just stand here with a microphone.
No, that's not true.
So I would like to turn things over to you in that respect. Are you
Okay.
ready, or do you have to set up anything before that we're ready?
I brought everything out.
Okay, so I'm going to hand you this microphone, which everybody who comes regularly knows I never do.
Yes, I know.
And we got permission, special dispensation from Jason Strong of Fairfield Media Center to do that, and hopefully the noise won't be too aggravating to anyone.
Okay.
And I'm going to go wash my hands,
All right.
okay?
Good
All
luck. Good boy.
Please hold down the phone.
Yes. Well, every time Steve has me on the show, I make empanadas. And we were talking the other day, and he said to me, I said, well, each recipe I could get about 15. You know, if we make them smaller, I can get about 30. And he was like, oh, yeah, well, let's make 2 batches, and those will bake, and then we'll make another batch, and those we're going to fry. And I was like, okay. Apparently, Steve has never made empanadas, okay? He thinks it's just like something that you put into the computer and it comes out ready to go. So I actually practice. I'm here. I practice with some sweet dough this time. I've never made sweet dough before. This is my first time. So I decided to bring in some pieces and have Steve mold and make empanadas because it's so easy. Yeah.
Bring that. Yes, thank you. So I just want you to know, I'm going to just preface this whole activity that the only time I ever made a pasta type dish in a setting, we'll say a public type setting, it was in Italy, and my particular pasta was held up by the instructor in front of everybody else's, and she said, "Would you serve this to your dog?"
I thought you were going to brag. Okay. Well, I put a parchment out because the chocolate dough stains a bit. And I know this is hardcore stuff, but I didn't want it to get into the grooves. So they're already separated into parts. We have the chocolate dough and we have the just a regular sweet dough.
Which
Sorry.
which one would you like me to start with?
We should probably start with the one without chocolate because we're going to roll it out. And then I'm going
You're
to,
gonna roll it.
well, you are. It's already open. These are a few of my tricks. You know, I open bags and I do stuff with them. Okay, so there can be 2 empanada discs made out of this.
Oh, so you want me to cut this in half or just tear it in half?
You can tear it.
Okay, and tell us what this dough is made from.
It's just regular AP flour.
That's all purpose.
All-purpose flour. It is organic. It's really light. I liked it. This is the first time I use it. I got it from the bulk section, and it's really good.
Okay, pretty good. They don't need to be weighed or anything, just to make sure they're exactly the same.
Only when I'm working do I weigh anything, but I pretty much have the eye.
Yeah. Well, okay. So now what do you want me to do?
Okay, so now you roll it into a ball, and I have a method that I learned when I was making hundreds of empanadas, which is to use this tortilla maker. The tortilla maker is the person who makes the tortilla. This is just really to flatten out to get a disc. So this is the fastest way to do it without having to use the rolling pins. So you bring it down, you press on it, and then you use the handle. Yeah, you put your weight on it. Let's take a look at it. I use the parchment so it won't stick. Perfect. I had you do it the easy way. It's okay. I had you do it the easy way this time. I won't make you do it. You're good. You can save that. You'll see. So come on.
Oh.
Take it out.
I didn't know what I was supposed to do. You want me to take it off?
Yeah, take it off.
Okay.
Slowly, gently. There's a difference between the sweet dough and the salty dough. The sweet dough is much more difficult to work with in the sense that it's delicate. It's a delicate dough. It breaks apart easily. And it's not, you don't use that much sugar. It's just a tablespoon per recipe. Yeah, cool. Right? Then you come over here, and we have two fillings. I made, one of the fillings is dulce de leche. I use goat milk. So I used coconut sugar and goat milk. Yes, there is. Here you go, sir. And then you take a bit of the filling, put it in the center.
Do I need to patch this or not?
No, you're going to do it, but in a second.
Put this in
So,
the center?
yeah, put it in the center. You could take whatever I wouldn't put all because then it'll ooze out, which is not a good kitchen word. But, so, then yeah, you could put as much or as little as you want. Don't overfill them. The moment you overfill the empanadas, they break and everything's all over the place and there's no sense in having the dough.
How's that? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. And then you just fold it over like a half
you gonna do
moon. No. Fold it over like a half moon.
Okay.
And you can tell when you touch it, you can see how easily it's malleable.
So you would just want me to pinch it?
Yep. I pinch it with 2 fingers. You can be fancy about it, or you can, do whatever you want to do. You can braid it. And so, as Steve is doing that, I'll bring these out here and show you guys.
Don't cover up mine.
I'm not. It's going off to the side. And so that's it. It's ready to go.
That's bad.
You can pinch it.
So what are you talking about? This is easy.
Yeah, because I brought this. That's what I was telling you. I'm giving you the easy. If not, I would make you roll it out.
So everybody needs. I mean, I have one of these. This is great. So
Yeah.
everybody needs a tortilla press. That's all.
Yeah.
And get a good one because it doesn't pay to be skimpy on your tortilla press because you want something that has a lot of weight, which is what this has. If you get one that's really cheap, it won't have that weight, and you need that weight to flatten everything out right. Okay.
Correct. You can get one at any market. Latin American supermarket has them.
Now, what are we going to do with this?
You can put it on the corner, and then you can try a chocolate one.
Okay.
Try to make a chocolate one. Those are cut to roll it into a ball and do the same thing.
Do you want me to actually do this with the rolling pin?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Is this 1 or 2?
1.
This is 1. Okay.
Okay, so while you do that, I'll bring the other batch. Right.
Now, the thing about this dough is it's a stiff dough. So that means that tortilla press is much more my friend than the rolling pin.
Yes, I would prefer if you use this because it'll be easier.
I would prefer that too. So I think
That takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Okay, then just press down. Use your body weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Not bad. Not bad, right?
Not bad at all.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, and this is a waxed paper, so it should be easier to remove.
And are we using the same filling?
Actually, I have a chocolate fudge.
Oh, okay.
You can use the same spoon if you want. So, as I was saying earlier, the dulce de leche we usually make with cow's milk, but using goat milk is a great alternative if you are allergic to dairy or you don't do dairy. But you can also just buy it already made. That's just if you want to take the time to do it for yourself at home. Good. You're great. You're hired.
So, hey, will you tell us about the savory filling you made? That's actually the savory crust that you made for this?
The one I didn't bring in?
No, didn't you do a manchego?
Oh yes, but it's not that dough is this sweet dough.
Okay.
And I made a pineapple marmalade. That's also a very Dominican thing, you know. That's why I try to stick to the ingredients at least if I can't get all of the flavors. So I made a pineapple marmalade and I put some cheese in these, and that's the mixture. That's the filling for that one. And you can use any fruit with some cheese, and it just, I don't know, the whole thing is about feeling good. And the chocolate ones are dulce de leche. So you know later on when you get a chance to try them.
Is it? Would you suggest serving these at room temperature or serving them warm? How would you suggest serving them? And then, in addition to that, or answer that one first. And then.
Well, the only reason that they're here is because I needed them for the show, but I ate a lot of them while I was taking them out of the oven.
Gotcha. And I noticed that you didn't fry them.
Yes.
And they are, but you could fry them right now, couldn't you?
Well, I tried to make the dough, but I used a recipe that it was the first time I had used it, which was from the same person who put up this recipe. I mean, I make some adjustments, but due to the fact I was doing so many things at once, I'm not a great baker, and I think I might have done something wrong with the dough. I probably didn't follow the instructions.
Oh, okay. Well, then nobody wants to try them. That'll be just fine. Thank you. So can you give us the basic proportions for the doughs?
Yeah, there's 3 cups of flour. For the chocolate one, I put in a little bit less flour, maybe about a 1/4 cup less, and I added 3/4 cups of cocoa powder because I knew the cocoa powder would give me some would make it so that it wouldn't break so easily. A pinch of salt, a tablespoon of coconut sugar, and 2 sticks of butter. And honestly, I would put cinnamon, in there. You can add spices to flavor it up. It's all up to you. The world is your oyster.
It really sounds wonderful, and I have to say that I did eat one of the manchego pineapple marmalades, and it's really good. Really good.
I'm glad you liked it. This is just the typical garnish to add a little bit of color when I finish with the pastelón.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say very quickly is that the pineapple was I didn't use any sugar. I used molasses, melao, as we call it in the Dominican Republic. It's just a smell that just overwhelms anywhere where they had a sugarcane factory. But we ate it with everything, and we made sweets out of it. And when I used it today, instead of sugar, it just took me all the way back. You know that. Yeah, it's not, and there's a bitterness in there, and I don't know. I guess it's all just home-based stuff. Those memories, food is always attached to memory somehow. Yes.
Not only is it attached to memory, but it's what brings so many memories flooding back to us. And I think that it's one of the most, for me anyway, and I think for most people, it's one of the most special types of use of memory is the food memories that we have. And especially those, if we were lucky enough to have somebody like your mother, for example, who was a great cook and made that central point of the family, making sure that there was food there that everybody could enjoy. And those are the things, the taste that I remember from home too, just like that. Because you and I, again, we were having this discussion that my generation, not yours, my generation is the last generation in modern times, we'll say, where maybe both parents were together as a family for in terms of the percentages of those families that stayed together, and in addition to that, probably only one parent worked. So there was always a parent who had the time and maybe the role to actually cook food, and it was before prepared foods were so readily available, before frozen foods were the rage, before TV dinners were the rage. Like when I was growing up, TV dinners started to appear. But before that, everybody ate fresh foods. And so we have that wealth of memory from all those fresh foods, and that led us into another discussion, which maybe we'll get to at some point in time. Meanwhile, I just want to say thank you so much for coming, and I like the fact that you can hold that microphone, and I think you should do it more often. And I'm really I wish everybody who sees this had the opportunity to taste these wonderful foods. But hey, that's the breaks. We're here and they're not. So thanks to everybody's Whole Foods, thanks to Green Building Supply, thanks to Fairfield Media Center and Jason Strong, and thank you all for coming and being here for the show. And we'll see you the first Tuesday of December. That's Tuesday, December 3rd. And this is Liz Peralta. I'm Steve Boss, your host. And you've been listening, watching, whatever you're doing, to Great Taste.
Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.